Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, and together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service and jbiztechvalley.com.
Well, Rabbi Simon, we have one of the younger members of the State Assembly with us, and one of the more, I think he's dynamic as an assemblyman, Phil Goldfeder from Queens. And welcome to the Jewish View once again. You're a repeat guest, so thank you for coming back.
I hope that means I did something right.
Well, it must mean we did something right too.
Absolutely.
Because, we're becoming fast
It's an
friends
honor.
here.
It's really an honor and a pleasure, and I think this is so important to get some of the issues out to the public, to let people know what's not only what's doing in Albany, but sort of for the larger community and how we're working to try and help.
What are the new issues? It's a new year. This is your second term? Or?
This is my third term. I
really?
started, this is my fourth session, my third term, because I took over
In the
middle of a term. So I got to finish off my first. I did one full second, and now I'm in my third.
Okay, so let me ask you about first of all, have you been to the new local kosher restaurant, Terra?
I did, and
did.
The truth is that there's really nothing to compare it to. So when you're in Albany for days on end and there's a hot meal, I can assure you it tasted great to me.
Okay.
So I was very, very happy with it, and I'm excited. I'm going to be going back again tonight. So,
Tonight?
yes.
All right, well, that's good, we'll go. What are you, and the prices were good?
Yeah, the food
And
was
the food
good.
was
The prices
tasty?
were good,
Okay,
and
good.
there was good kosher wine. I mean, it was an all in all, it was a very good experience. I wish
Okay.
the owners a lot of success and a lot of hatzlacha. They should do well, and they should stay open for as many years at least as I'm here.
Okay, very good.
Take care of you.
You've been salivating for this.
That's
for,
right.
For
It's
a
been
long
3
time.
years of a lot of salad and cold cuts. So
So the big issue that's going on now is the Education Investment Tax Credit, EITC, and it seems like it's tied to this thing called the DREAM Act, which is regarding illegal immigrants. Should it be tied? Do you think it's just going to fall apart? What's the weather?
it's a
Which
great
way's the
question,
wind
very
blowing?
relevant because it's literally the topic of conversation in today's session and so many meetings that I had come through my office today. The issue is very simple, and it's an issue that I ran for office on 4 years ago, and it was an issue my parents struggled with, an issue that their parents struggle with. We're hoping to end that cycle. The issue is the skyrocketing tuition costs. Tuition for yeshiva, for private schools, have literally continuously gone up and up and up through the years, to the point where for most families, it's what they're struggling to pay every single week. They're struggling to put food on the table, they're struggling to provide for their families, and they're struggling to pay for their tuition for their children. And if you do the best you can and people think it's a priority, you have to pay for the education of your children, then sadly something's got to give, right? We're only making X amount of dollars and tuition continues to go up. It's gonna hurt you in other areas. So, the state has done a really good job, and to the credit of the previous speaker and other legislative leaders across the state, we've done a good job in providing funding to non-public schools with programs of CAP, mandated services to pay schools for services that they're entitled to, in secular education.
But aren't the teachers' unions really fervently against this? And is there a compromise that you could see coming?
Well, I
down
think
the
for
line?
years we've been actually giving private schools X amount of dollars. There's a school in my district, there's multiple yeshivas in my district that receive upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars from the state. However, we have to do more. And this idea about 3 years ago, the same year that I came into office, I'm not taking credit for the bill, but it was the same year that I came into office that this idea of the Education Investment Tax Credit came about. It's been a very, very controversial issue. Those supporters of the public schools are opposed to it. They believe that taking money and putting it into private education is somehow taking away from public education. And obviously those parents who are sending their kids to Catholic school or yeshiva are struggling paying the tuition. So I think that the idea that we need to put out, and the idea that I've been telling the UFT and
Well, that's
other
what I was going to
unions.
ask you. Do they come to your office?
Oh, absolutely,
and, talk to
and
you?
they've been very supportive. The UFT
Of
was very supportive of my first campaign.
Yes.
The UFT has been very supportive of my candidacy, of my career, and I owe them for that. And we call in the Orthodox Jewish community, we call hakaras hatov, right? We give back to those who gave to us,
Right.
to show appreciation. And what I have said, and I have been very, very consistent to teachers, to parents in the community, just because we're providing funding for non-public school does not mean I'm somehow trying to take away money from from public education.
And do they believe you?
Look, that's a question I think for them. I think that I have been a strong fighter, and I have a strong record fighting for every dollar I can for public education. Like I said, the UFT was very, very supportive of my candidacy because of my belief that we need a strong public education. However, at the same time, I think that in a state with a $142 billion budget, we can find room for a few $1 million to help all parents. So parents have a choice. I send my 2 children to private school. That's my choice. I want a religious education for them. At the same time, their secular education deserves to get reimbursed and or credited in some way, shape, or form. The state started that with cap and mandated services, and I think the EITC is a great way to continue moving forward to help our parents.
But do you see now that it's your 3rd session, do you see it moving forward, or maybe more assembly people are agreeing with this?
So, as Mark opened with in the question, it has been lumped together with other things, and how does that all play out? For the first time, this is something I've been championing for 3 years. Since the first day I got here, this was a bill that literally, I had people in my office just a few weeks after I got elected talking to me about this bill and how we have a long-term strategy, we want to get it done. And sadly, at the time, we didn't have any other support. And we were pushing it, and we were just trying grassroots to build coalitions, to get people on board, to explain it to families so they can then go pressure their elected officials. So we built a pretty strong coalition in the Assembly. The Senate had already proven for a few years, they had passed it a few times, that's something that we're willing to do. We had not gotten any cooperation or any agreement from the second floor.
Well, when you're in conference, what do you hear about this? In terms of opposition, do you hear Kathy Nolan telling you, we can't pass this, I'm too tied to the union, she's a fellow Queens Assemblywoman?
There are members, like any issue, there are going to be members on both sides. And when you're speaking, especially within the conference, you're passionate. You want to be honest. You want to have a real debate. And we have those all the time. And not all, I wish it were true that my colleagues always agreed with me, but they don't. However, we have a very strong coalition. We have, I think, over 60 sponsors of Democrats, in addition to so many more Republicans who have signed on in the Assembly.
So that should pass it, shouldn't it?
So I think the Assembly, we have a really strong coalition hoping to pass it. However, the big change this year was that finally, for the first time, the governor has actually signaled a willingness to engage and to get on board to do this.
Yes.
However, he has tied it, as you mentioned, to the DREAM Act. So.
Right. So does he uncouple it, and say, look, this is what I tried to do. Look at him, the champion, because he's got to find a way to compromise here and show that he's a conciliator and not dogmatic and digging his heels.
I've heard both ways. I've heard both sides. I've heard people say, well, he put them together because he wants them both. And then I heard other people say, well, I heard he put them together because he doesn't want either one of them.
Right.
And I think time will tell. I think that we're going to wait and see how things play out. Obviously, we're going to continue to fight in the Assembly to get it passed, and then hopefully once we do have it passed, it's up to the governor to get it done.
When the governor invites the legislators to the mansion for their little receptions, and do you bring this up to him and ask him why he coupled it and why he can't decouple it and uncouple it, whatever? So.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of getting invited to the mansion and having those conversations, again, is much like our Democratic conference. So we can have an honest conversation. The governor says that he supports it. He said that publicly. I believe he said that to the Cardinal last year.
Yeah, but what about putting it together with the DREAM Act or uncoupling it and
the governor, based on what I've heard, is that he supports both and that he wants to see both happen, and he thought this was the best way to see that happen.
Okay.
Like I said earlier, whether that ends up being the case, only time will tell.
And just so we're clear, the Senate supports the EITC, but not the DREAM Act. And the Assembly supports the DREAM Act, but not so much the EITC. So therefore, if you couple them together, the Senate comes along with the DREAM Act and the EITC, and so does the Assembly.
Which goes back to the question of, did the governor want both, or did the governor want neither?
Right.
And I think that it's going to be the next 3 or 4 weeks in Albany are going to be very, very telling as we continue through the budget process.
So you don't have a sense yet?
No, I think we're going to continue. We have challenges still within our own conference that I think that we need to address. We have a brand new speaker, and
I was going to ask you, how do you like him?
Carl, number one, is just a great guy. He's smart, he's capable, he's enthusiastic.
He's quiet.
Again, people, and reporters have asked about, well, he's quiet or he's reserved, and I think the better way to say it is he's thoughtful, right?
Oh,
I think he's a very thoughtful person. He's not rushing to judgment or putting things out there, and I think that what I have found is that Carl's been around. He's been in the Assembly, I think, 14 years or 15 years. And I think that has earned him the respect of a lot of the senior members who have been around longer. But at the same time, Carl is a relatively newer member, and 14 years is arguably relatively newer, and he could relate to some of the newer members who have come in over the last 5 years. So I think Carl strikes a balance and was the guy, as you could see, who was able to build a coalition in the conference to get the votes to be speaker. And look, again, time will tell, but he's done so far an amazing job. I've had a great relationship with him for a long time, and I'm excited about our future.
I'm going to make you laugh. You didn't want to be speaker, right?
No.
You see?
No, I think my wife wanted it even less than I wanted. But look, Carl is a great guy, and I have very, very high hopes. He's in a very, very short time, he's already shown a willingness to work outside his comfort zone.
Is he going to be good for the Jewish community?
Look, it's hard to say, well, what is good for the Jewish community and what is not. I mean, there's a lot of issues that we stand that the Jewish community stands for, and there's a lot of issues that sort of are you can go one way or another, and that is, there's no one issue that defines either he supports Israel or he supports the Jewish people or he doesn't. And
Israel is not a state issue.
No, but
to
walk,
it doesn't matter.
To walk to the federal level, right? It's very hard you can't define a member of Congress or a member of the Assembly on any one issue, right? Someone has a record of standing up for the people in his district, of standing up for the Jewish people. Whether he supports one bill or not is not a referendum on his overall support for the Jewish community.
Right.
So,
I'm not saying one bill. Yeah. I'm just saying overall, do you think that he's going to be good?
Oh, there's no question.
For the Jewish. So we're still going to have a Rebbe's birthday celebration. We're still going to have Tu B'Shvat. We're still going to have the Purim and other things that those.
I think those are good questions for when the speaker is sitting in this chair and you can ask him. I mean, I hope so. I mean, those are events and opportunities that I find are obviously near and dear to my heart as an practicing Orthodox Jew, and I hope we'll continue to have those things.
Okay, so let me ask you also about the an update, because personally and for your community, Hurricane Sandy. Did you have a new house? Did you rebuild? Are you okay?
Thankfully, we had a tremendous outpouring of support from community members, from family members, and we were able, thank God, to rebuild our home and put our lives back together.
Same address, same spot?
Same address.
Okay, so you didn't have to move.
No, we were displaced for a few months, but we were able to rebuild.
What about the whole community? Is it totally
so then I was going to
rebuilt?
ask about the community. That's my next
So, what's interesting is that to drive through the neighborhood, you would think that everything is great and everything is back to normal. But that's on the very surface level. There's homes where I'll go visit a friend. I haven't seen him in a long time. Oh, how you doing? I'd love to come over and say hello. So I'll go to his house and I'll walk into his house and his walls are still gone. And I said, well, what's going on? What's the problem? How come you haven't rebuilt your house yet? And he'll proceed to tell me a story about his insurance company, the city program, the state program, the bank, the this, the that. And what I have realized that this is not a problem that's going to go away in 6 months or a year or 2 years. Wow. And sadly, probably not even 5 years, right? Everybody is still struggling, and everybody's at a different level of their recovery. And as much as there are those who will try and convince you that we've moved on and the world has moved on, there are some families that are still struggling. They don't have the resources. They don't have the funding to get things back in place. And my office and personally I've tried to be a resource for everybody, for whatever they need, and to be an advocate. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to stop and I'm not going to rest until every family is safe and secure back in their own home. And I want to just say I have 2 little children at home. Right. And more than my wife and I and our family as a whole, my children were deeply affected. And we don't know yet what kind of toll that's going to take as they grow up. We take things for granted. Oh, we're going swimming, and all of a sudden that could trigger thoughts in my son's head. The time when the water was rising up as he was sleeping. So, there's a lot of trauma I think we're yet to even realize, and that's something that we're going to continue to keep an eye on.
Well, I didn't expect that. That was really, something that those personal stories that you just don't. You just don't expect.
It's very, very scary, and more so, how much we have to keep in mind. How much are we preparing for the future? Are we more prepared today for another storm than we were before Sandy? Right? Have we done enough to say that we've learned our lesson and we've put enough processes in place so we don't have these problems again?
What kind of process? Like they do dams? That's what I was reading.
No, evacuation zones and evacuation routes.
It's a mixture of both.
Tell them how to get out quickly.
Mark, I say it's a mixture of both. Number one is that we have signage hanging up throughout Rockaway, throughout Howard Beach, that is directing our families to the wrong evacuation site. So think about it. If you
Right.
didn't take the time to pay attention, you're driving your car, you're trying to evacuate, you look at the sign, it sends you to point A and your evacuation is at point B.
Right.
Those are the most simple things. Have we made progress? There's no question. You know, we're talking about things like building up our beaches, having hardened dunes, a new boardwalk that is structurally sound, that will stand the ocean currents, higher walls along the bay, so when the bay waters come up, you know, the water doesn't come over. But at the same time, we have to worry about the big things and also the small things. As homeowners, do we have enough food? Do we have a go bag? Do we have flashlights? Do we have batteries? I mean, these were issues that no one really thought of. After the Sandy, people looked around and said, like, where do we get a flashlight? Or where do we find batteries? And those are things we should have been prepared. So I think government has a job to do, and I think families on our own, we have a job to do.
Okay, are we going to see a return of the Rockaway ferry?
You know, I've often said it took a hurricane like Sandy to show the world what the people of Rockaway have known for the last 50 years. People of Rockaway have known for the last 50 years that we need updated infrastructure,
Right.
we need updated transportation systems, and we have been fighting tirelessly for ferry service. And Sandy came about, and all of a sudden, within a few days after Sandy, we had a ferry, and the ferry stuck around for 2 years, and unfortunately, Mayor de Blasio ended it.
Where's the ferry going from? Because I'm not from New York City.
Yeah, it goes
Just to explain
from
it a little
Beach
more.
108th Street in Rockaway to Lower Manhattan, to Water Street in Lower Manhattan. On the subway, it's a ride that'll take you about an hour and 10 minutes on an uncomfortable, crowded subway ride. This was a beautiful ferry ride that took you past the Statue of Liberty, that took you past the waterfronts of Brooklyn, and really in 45 minutes got you from Rockaway to Lower Manhattan like a mensch, as they say. You know, there was no hustle and bustle. It was just a beautiful, beautiful ride, and it was affordable. The problem was the mayor ended it. On the 2-year anniversary of Sandy, the mayor said enough is enough. I don't want to pay for it. It's too expensive.
Well, how much was it?
You know, again, the claim was the subsidy was you know, maybe $4 or $5 million a year, and the mayor said, well, it could cost up to $6 or $8 million
Well,
a year.
couldn't Mayor Bloomberg have given you the money personally to
Well, look,
call it the Bloomberg ferry or the Trump ferry? Or?
We tried to find public-private partnerships. As
Yeah.
you may know, we have a casino that's not too far at Aqueduct Racetrack, and we brought them on the boat. We asked JFK Airport to maybe find a stop at JFK, and they can help. Some of the
Right.
airlines can help subsidize it. The mayor recently announced in his State of the City address that the ferry is going to be coming back in 2017,
Oh, okay.
which is great for 2017. The
Right.
sad part is that I have families in my community who need to get to work tomorrow. They need to get to work next week and next month. 2017 is
Well, what was
good news.
2017? Why?
I think the
It's
idea
an
was
election. It's a re-election.
well, it is a
year.
re-election year, and I'm not going to speculate as to what the mayor was thinking.
No, but I can.
The idea was that it's going to take time to build a ferry infrastructure, to do a comprehensive ferry plan, not just one route, but a ferry system, a comprehensive ferry system. And again, that's a great thing, and I'm very happy that we are doing that. However, I think we need to focus on the right now.
Okay, so you mentioned JFK. You're going to fix 878, which is that interstate that goes to JFK. I
Yeah,
presume?
it's an interstate that connects. I mean, if Rockaway residents have 3 evacuation points. There's the Marine Parkway Bridge that takes you to
Right.
southern Brooklyn. There's the Cross Bay Bridge that takes
Right.
you into Howard Beach, into Queens. And then there's the 878, which
Right.
takes you out through Nassau. That's it. If any one of those roadways or bridges are closed, you're now essentially suffocating 130,000 people who live there. The 878 is an issue, again, that has plagued our community for a long, long time, and sadly has not gotten the attention from the agencies it needs. I've partnered with my colleague in the Nassau County Legislature, Howard Coppell, who is a tireless fighter for his communities in Nassau County. And now, most recently, I have a new colleague, Todd Kaminsky, who just got elected to replace retiring Assemblyman Harvey Wiesenberg. And we have formed a great coalition to put pressure on the state, to put pressure on the county authorities, to finally see some real action. So we've got a short-term deal in place, a multi-million-dollar short-term deal, but as you said, it's just a Band-Aid. We need a real fix. We need a fix because it's not just about a bumpy road or road that sometimes flood. If we choke off, if we close down the 878 in a flood, our families have nowhere left to go when it comes to evacuation.
Except the bridges.
Well, and high winds during a hurricane, the bridges close. With sustained winds of 55 miles an hour,
Well,
the bridges will close.
So why do you want to remove the toll on the Cross Bay Bridge?
Well, that's a separate issue.
But that's going to pay for...
I wish that were the case. Sadly, the money that is collected on the Cross Bay Bridge goes to fill the black hole that we call the MTA budget.
Oh, okay.
That money continues to subsidize the MTA, and The idea is, well, it helps to fix the bridge, but at the end of the day, during a hurricane or during a natural disaster, if there's sustained winds of 55 miles per hour, the bridges are going to be closed. And that's assuming there's no water yet. The winds are just high. And that's what the case was during Sandy. Sandy, there was the water didn't come from the sky. The water came from the ground up. The bridges were closed, not because they were flooded. The bridges were closed because the winds, the sustained winds, which left our families with zero options. Because by the time the bridges were closed, the 878 was already flooded and completely unpassable. So there was, again, people who didn't evacuate, people who stayed in the community were stranded with nowhere to go. And that has ultimately led and compounded the devastation that Sandy caused.
Okay, now I got to ask you. I grew up in Mill Basin. You know Mill Basin
Yes,
in Brooklyn?
sir.
Okay. It's not too far from Rockaway. And we had the Concorde flying over our house. And the Concorde would rattle the bow window and all the tchotchkes that we had on the bow window. And I used to look up and think, wow, this is great. And I used to wave to the people and they waved back, and that's how low it flew.
Yep.
And this is a supersonic transport plane, SST. But you have this petition about noise, airplane noise, quieting, and you don't want the airplane
Talking
noise.
about JFK.
Well, yeah, I mean, all
We
planes
live-
that fly over Far Rockaway. And
We live
I
in the
live,
shadows of JFK.
yeah,
in
and
our
I grew
communities.
up with living on the other side of the shadows of JFK
That's
from
right.
where you are. But I'm just saying, I mean, you know what you're getting into. So what's the problem here?
So there's no question.
And
that
how
I
many
grew up with it.
signatures did you have?
Yeah, thousands. It's and for anybody who hasn't signed, it's stopjfknoise.com. Stopjfknoise.com.
Okay.
But here's the point. Now I was born and raised in Rockaway, and I grew up with those planes flying overhead. To this day, we could be outside and having a barbecue in the backyard, and I would not even notice it. But we'll have guests over, and they'll be scared. What's going on? The house is shaking.
Right.
The loud noise. I don't even hear it anymore. It's something that I have become accustomed to. However, there are some families in certain neighborhoods that are a closer proximity to the airport. By the time it comes over my community or comes over my house, it's already at a certain altitude where we're getting plane noise where strangers to it will think that it's outrageous. But we've become accustomed to, much like you did in Mill Basin.
Yeah.
There are areas in Jamaica Bay, neighborhoods at Broad Channel,
Right.
Hamilton Beach,
Right.
Howard Beach, that are much closer to the airport. So when the planes are going over those neighborhoods, they don't have a chance to climb to the altitudes, and those neighborhoods suffer more than others. Now you'll say to yourself, well, you knew where you were buying your house. Now the difference is that the technology of the airplanes is such today that it used to be planes would come in on a flight path that was 50 miles wide, meaning a plane can come in here one day, here the next day, and here the next day, landing, right? The technology has gotten better, so planes can fly in a much narrower space, which means certain communities are now getting a lot more planes than they were accustomed to or that they were used to, meaning...
Yeah, but the planes are quieter than when they could fly, 50 yards or 50 feet apart. I mean, it was one of those things that, you don't hear the propellers anymore.
Well, the truth is, at one point, I was getting a plane every hour, right?
Yeah,
That's
right.
something that's palatable, it's understandable, you live near the airport. But the new technology has actually made it worse for certain communities, right? Instead of hearing a plane every hour, instead of every community getting a plane every hour, one community is getting planes every 15 minutes. And that's the idea.
But I liked looking up and seeing these planes. I used
Well,
to build model airplanes.
I have
like
thousands and thousands of people who've signed our petition who disagree. So I do believe that there's a cost of living in New York City, right?
Right.
It's actually when you're trying to catch a flight,
Right.
it's actually quite nice. You live right near the airport, and you don't have to plan too far ahead. But at the same time, we've got to be respectful of every community and make sure that we're doing everything we can to help.
So I have to ask something. You chair the subcommittee on autism retention.
Yes.
And is there a special reason why you focused on that subcommittee?
I think the autism is a disability that has continued to rise. It's continued to garner attention across the country.
Has it impacted your family?
No, thank God not. I have,
If you've learned about that, it always intrigues me because I see these numbers. Is there a reason for this?
it's funny, and some have linked it, some have. I am not prepared or in a position to say, but some have linked it to vaccinations, and obviously that's a debate that's going on nationwide right now. I'm not in a position to speak about it. I'm not an expert, and I'm not one of those politicians that feels the need to give my
Except
thoughts.
now it's a spectrum. So,
Correct.
So now you're looking at more, you're sort of putting it not into saying, okay, it's this narrow thing, it's something that's
Yeah, but
wider.
5 years ago, or even less, it wasn't even, it was grouped into a disability. It was a general mental health disability. Now I think, when you do that, it's much harder to understand what we're dealing with and to find, resolutions. Now that we've kind of understood that it is separate, the numbers are astounding. I mean, at once the federal government thought it was 1 out of every 160 kids were diagnosed. Now I think last year it was 1 in every 62. I think now, I heard this afternoon, is 1 in every 54. So the numbers, and again, we're trying to take autism out of the shadows. And that's my goal as the chairman, to try and make it a real issue that people have to focus on. We have a great organization right in my district called the New York Families for Autistic Children that do tremendous work. And we're trying to not only bring it out of the shadows, but for the purposes of giving it the resources, the attention it deserves, so we can find the solutions, so our children can get the help they need, and that the families who are struggling, and thank God, and I have not experienced it personally, but I've seen the stories firsthand. As chairman of the committee, I've had the opportunity to travel the state and to hear some of these heart-wrenching problems, and I'm hopeful that my work in some small way can try and help
What are
those
they
families.
trying to do? You can't cure these, I mean.
No, I mean, look,
that's-
it's a matter of finding the right amount of therapy, or the right
It's
amount of
managing it,
services that
managing it.
can deal with it. And we have seen stories where, with the right schooling, with the right education, with the right therapy, kids are progressing and doing better. They are advancing. I've heard stories where they're in special schools, and they ultimately they find ways after years to mainstream and become a regular student. I've heard of kids going to elementary, middle school, specialized schools, and then being able to go to a regular high school. So we've made a tremendous amount of progress, but we're not going to make progress if we bury our heads in the sand and sweep it under the rug.
So
That's
do you
my
have an
job.
advocacy day, autism advocacy day?
Well, there's a disability advocacy
No,
day,
I know that.
and we are trying to create sometime toward the end of session, whether it's in May or June, a day where we can focus specifically on autism, and that's something that hopefully we'll hear more about as we progress in the coming days and
Okay,
weeks.
so now I got to ask you about your dirty little secret.
I didn't know I had one.
Okay, you're on the Puerto Rican Hispanic Task Force.
Yes.
I don't see anything in your background about being a Puerto Rican or Hispanic.
It's not a secret. It's on my website. I'm very proud to be a part of the task force. I'm also a member of the Irish Legislators Society. I represent a very diverse community, and I'm very proud of the diversity of my community. I'm Orthodox Jewish. I have a tremendous Orthodox Jewish community, but I have a tremendous amount of Irish Catholics and Italians and a large Hispanic
Hispanics,
population.
okay.
In areas of Ozone Park and in Hamilton Beach and Arbor by the Sea and Rockaway. So yeah,
Right.
there's a tremendous diverse community, and I'm happy to associate myself with legislative groups that can help me understand the needs, understand the issues. I just talked to my colleague, Assemblyman Victor Pichardo, about bilingual, funding for bilingual education, which is something that obviously it seems like it's a simple thing to support, but sitting with some of my colleagues to truly understand the needs of the communities is sometimes very helpful. So I'm proud to be a member of the caucus and look forward
So
to continued great work.
Do you go to the Somos conference in Puerto Rico?
I have not gone to Somos. I spend enough time away from my wife and
Well,
kids.
if you want someone to go in your stead,
I appreciate that very much. Again, being in
Puerto
Albany,
Rico.
my wife, I tell everybody I serve at the pleasure of my wife. I mean, she's been nothing but supportive of my career and my passions, and I spend enough time away from my family being here in Albany. So when I get to be at home and have the opportunity to be at home, I like to be at home. So Shabbos with the family, I don't like to miss.
So habla español?
A very little bit. A very
Un
little bit.
poquito?
Poquito.
Okay.
Mark, you're trying to get the job? Spanish job over here.
You can go on my behalf anytime. Don't you worry.
All right. So I think.
Hey, listen, we're out of time. It's always good. Thank you for coming back. And again, Mazel Tov for being reelected.
Thank you.
So that's a good thing. So we'll see bigger and better things from you, I'm sure, as you get more seniority. And you're doing a lot of good work now for people in New York City. And continued success and do it with good health.
Much
Thank you.
success to you.
Thank
Yes,
you very,
absolutely.
very much. Thank you for having me.